Here is one of the world's most desolate places. Barbarism and bloodshed define it. To survive, villagers must arm themselves and hunt various animals. This place is the interior of Alaska, a location called Tanana. Last winter, the villagers endured over 40 days of polar day, a darkness that mentally tormented them as their food supplies dwindled. Fortunately, with the arrival of summer, the ice began to recede, and villagers rushed to prepare for the coming winter. For centuries, catching king salmon was their most important activity, but this year was different. Alaska issued a critical notice banning the fishing of king salmon, causing an uproar among the villagers. Despite the intention to protect dwindling fish stocks, this deprived villagers of their most reliable food source. Out of necessity, Charlie planned to travel upstream on the Tanana River to catch another type of fish. However, the journey was perilous with partially melted ice along the way. Several of his family members had drowned in this river, so Charlie proceeded with utmost caution. He had only traveled a quarter of the way when he realized the situation was worsening. The frequent collisions felt like blows to his heart, causing him great discomfort. Meanwhile, 30 miles away on a bald mountain, 24-year-old Joey was hunting. As his father aged, Joey took on the heavy responsibility of providing for his family. Over the past few years, he had become a top hunter. Today, he was tasked with scouting for migrating caribou to offset the loss from the king salmon. Unfortunately, the outlook was grim. He saw no signs of caribou, and the silence of the mountains was unsettling. If he couldn't find the herd, the consequences would be devastating. He had to venture further. Back in the village, Stan was preparing ammunition. Since fishing with nets was banned this year, there was a greater need for hunting and, consequently, for more bullets. Because store-bought bullets were expensive, Stan made his own, a skill that intrigued James, who came to learn eagerly. The villagers liked to help each other, so Stan shared his knowledge freely. 4 miles away, Charlie finally crossed the area with ice chunks and began looking for a suitable fishing spot. His target was broad whitefish, primarily for dog food, a fish they would never eat in the past but had to adapt to this year. Charlie anchored his boat, tied one end of the net to a tree, and gradually lowered it into the water. After 24 hours, he would return to check it, hoping for a good result. Back at the village, he joined a few villagers in conversation. Everyone was frustrated with the recent ban. Although well-intentioned, this government decree could starve the riverside dwellers, plunging them into deep panic about how to feed their families this summer. 25 miles to the north, Joey continued searching for caribou. After hours of hiking, he finally spotted a lone caribou, a target he couldn't afford to miss. Patiently, he aimed and shot the moment the caribou raised its head. The gunshot startled the animal, and it ran off. Joey hastily reloaded, carrying the village's hopes, but he missed. Distraught, he quickly followed the direction the caribou had taken, but it was nowhere to be seen. With night falling, Joey decided to spend the night on the mountain and continue tracking at dawn. The night passed without incident. The next day arrived, and the villagers eagerly awaited news from Joey's scouting. Meanwhile, Moore, the largest dog breeder in the village, famous for his sled dogs, was distressed as his wife's illness caused her memory to falter. The chaos in the dog kennel added to his woes, plunging him into anxiety. Worse, he had no money to hire help, and all the tasks fell on him. On the brink of collapse, he still had to care for the newborn puppies, which had dew claws, remnants of evolution that could harm other dogs if not removed at birth. Despite the potential financial return from raising the puppies successfully, Moore faced a daunting task. 30 miles away, Joey had a quick breakfast and continued searching for caribou along the ridge. His perseverance finally paid off when he spotted a caribou in the distance. Unsure of his shot, Joey began stripping off his clothing to reduce his scent. Just as he thought he would fail, the caribou paused, and Joey took the decisive shot, downing the caribou, which weighed around 100 kilograms. To avoid attracting bears with the scent of blood, Joey quickly began butchering the animal. Although the hunt was successful, Joey needed a herd to meet the village's needs, as one caribou could only provide limited meat. Charlie prepared to check the fishing nets, accompanied by his daughter Tanisha, as his son Bob had run away from home the previous year. Holding the village's hopes, they found the net unusually heavy, signaling a potentially good catch. However, they only found 3 small fish, a dire indicator of the river's depleted fish stocks. Charlie had to report this disheartening news back to the village. Back in the village, Courtney prepared to help her father renovate the outdoor toilet. Her 9-month-old baby took much of her energy, limiting her ability to assist her father as before. Touched by the mention of his wife, Moore felt guilty for sometimes losing his temper with her. To better address her medical needs, Courtney suggested moving her parents to Fairbanks, but Moore had lived his entire life in the village and couldn't even afford the trip. On the other side of the village, Stan and James practiced shooting while waiting for Joey, who returned with discouraging news. In 2 days, he had only seen one caribou and found no signs of a herd, a devastating blow to the villagers' hopes. However, James had heard of a bison herd in the northern region, which could feed several families due to its size. Bison are notoriously aggressive and fast, and the villagers had never hunted bison before, making it a risky venture. But they were out of options, as the hunting season was closing soon, and missing this chance could mean getting nothing at all. Everyone carefully selected their weapons, and once ready, they set out as a team. To approach the bison herd, they had to cross the Yukon River. As the hunters headed into the wilderness, a historic event was unfolding in Tanana. The governor of Alaska announced plans to build a road to the village, which would drastically change the villagers' way of life. The road would pass through 40 miles of forest east of the village, connecting to Manly Hot Springs and eventually reaching Fairbanks. The villagers now faced a vote on whether to construct this road. As expected, opinions were divided. Some supported it while others resisted, preferring to live as their ancestors did. Moore, however, saw the road as beneficial in the long run. While the village was abuzz with discussion, the hunting party reached the wilderness, but still had a 20-mile hike to the bison sighting location. Comprising top hunters, this group was a formidable team. Joey, a leader among the younger generation, felt immense pressure to excel and prove that the youth could lead future hunts and become the backbone of the village. Hours later, they entered the valley where the bison were supposed to be. The dense trees made hunting difficult, with the risk of bison hiding and launching surprise attacks. Despite navigating the forest, they found no trace of the bison, prompting them to urgently consult their map. Charlie suggested heading to a nearby creek mouth, and if the bison were not there, they should return home. However, going home was not an option for Joey. He climbed a steep ridge alone, determined to find the bison. Back in the village, the debate over the road continued. Moore, taking a break to feed his dogs, was visited by the city manager who offered him a job. If the road project was approved, it would need workers in a month, and Moore was a perfect candidate. Tempted by the job due to his wife's mounting medical bills, Moore faced a dilemma as the village was still divided. The manager gave him 3 days to decide. Back on the mountain, after 2 hours of scanning through his scope, Joey's persistence paid off. He found the bison herd and quietly signaled the others. They approached the herd stealthily, taking advantage of the favorable wind direction that prevented the bison from smelling them. Once in range, they raised their rifles. Sensing danger, the bison started to run. The hunters quickly chose their targets and opened fire, successfully killing one bison. Though only one, the 2,000-pound bison was sufficient. They quickly butchered it, and Joey's crucial role in the hunt was undeniable. Dividing the bison into 4 parts, they packed up and began their journey back to the village. The next morning, they finally returned to the village and unloaded the beef at James's fishery. As they sat down to rest, Moore approached to share significant news about the village. The government planned to build a road leading to the town, unsettling everyone with the potential changes it could bring. Moore had his own agenda. He had secured a job offer, which he kept to himself while subtly speaking well of the government's plan. However, Charlie and Stan were firmly against it. Stan cherished the area's seclusion, and Charlie feared the road would attract other hunters, depleting local wildlife. The village was divided, and some were ready to use force in protest. One man threatened his neighbor, leading to a police call, and his son ended up shooting 2 officers. A terrible incident followed by the deployment of riot police who quickly arrived and subdued the villagers, leading to a moment of reflection on the conflict's impact. The next day, Charlie set out into the wilderness to prepare for the upcoming winter by trapping furs. He explored a new area, considering building a trapping cabin if it proved fruitful. Anticipating the completion of the government's road, he sought more remote hunting grounds to avoid competition from outside hunters. Meanwhile, Moore was torn about the road proposal. He wanted the job it could bring, but didn't want to clash with strong opposition in the village. At this moment, his rival James came to buy a puppy, hoping to improve his sled dog lineage. Moore hesitated to sell a strong male puppy to his competitor, especially as his family was financially strained. He faced a tough decision: sell the puppy or hope for the road job, each choice carrying its risks. Elsewhere, Joey was tasked by his aunt to transport a small truck by raft from 130 miles upstream. Although experienced in raft building, Joey had never moved something as heavy as 4,000 pounds, so he sought advice from his father, Stan, who had decades of construction experience but no truck transportation experience. After an intense discussion, they brainstormed a plan, and Joey set off alone with some equipment. Meanwhile, Charlie reached a lush, vibrant wilderness 75 miles away. Pleased, he scouted for a location to build a cabin for winter trapping activities. He found an ideal spot on high ground near a wide river and began clearing a path with a chainsaw, enjoying the peaceful setting. On the other hand, Joey headed upstream to Dalton Bridge, where his sister Kate and cousin Zebu had been waiting with the pickup truck from Fairbanks. They planned to build a raft together. Joey proposed using 18 large spruce trees, each at least 30 feet long, with 8 smaller logs as crossbeams. With the plan set, they got to work. The 3 young people were selecting the right materials for their raft, specifically tall, dry spruce trees known for better buoyancy. After some searching, they found the perfect large tree. As the chainsaw roared, they cut a notch at the base of the tree, which then fell straight down due to an unstable center of gravity. The next tree, crucial for the raft's structure, posed a great challenge. It was a 40-foot-long solid log, intended as a main support. Strong winds made the task harder, and in their focus on a perfect cut, they forgot to alert the others. The tree fell forward with a creaking sound, causing the other 2 to flee in panic, but they soon regrouped and continued cutting more wood for the raft. Charlie, after scouting, returned home. Today, he was headed to the airport. 4 months ago, he received a call about his son Bob's accident in Fairbanks. Bob had crashed his snowmobile, resulting in a wrecked vehicle and serious injuries, including rods in his legs and steel plates in his arm. Seeing his son's condition was heartbreaking for Charlie, despite their usual disagreements. Bob was now discharged from the hospital, and as Charlie reached the airport, Bob arrived on crutches. Though still in a sorry state, he could walk, showing some recovery, but not as much as Charlie had hoped. He had expected Bob could help with work, but it seemed more recovery time was needed. On the other side of the village, Moore and his daughter Courtney were repairing the dog kennel. Moore hadn't mentioned his job decision, knowing Courtney opposed the road as she was content with their current life. Trying to change her mind, he confessed that a road management position had swayed him, aiming just to secure more income without having to sell dogs to his rival, James. Hearing her father's dilemma, Courtney chose to support his decision, though it felt like a betrayal to those in the village who valued tradition. 130 miles north at Dalton Bridge, Joey and his team spent the entire day cutting logs needed for the raft. They planned to transport them to an open area by boat. Initially, things went smoothly until the rope snapped as it tightened. Fortunately, the boat was undamaged, but the logs remained stuck on the ridge. Joey returned to shore to inspect and remove any obstacles under the logs. Once ready, he restarted the motor, and this time, no accidents occurred. The logs were successfully pulled into the water, and everything proceeded as planned. Back in the village, Moore was headed to James's house to tell him that his dogs were not for sale. Surprised to see Moore empty-handed, James, aware of Moore's financial struggles, sensed resistance. After Moore explained his decision, James realized Moore had sided with the government's project, betraying the village. Although James said little, he knew the villagers would view Moore differently. 130 miles upstream, Joey's team had finished collecting the wood, and the next task was to assemble the raft. To ensure the raft wouldn't capsize, they had to securely tie everything together, using sturdy nails to fix the crossbeams. Although the process was cumbersome, the pickup was very heavy, and if the raft couldn't support its weight, the loss would be immense. Once the raft was built, they carved a groove in the middle to place the boat that would provide the power. In Tanana, Stan took his family's sled dogs to the river to make the most of Alaska's brief summer by cleaning them. He picked up the puppies and threw them into the water to let them play freely. After they tired out, he let them run on the beach. Moore, having made his decision, decided to see his new job through. He traveled 6 miles upstream to the construction site to meet with a member of the advance team who explained the current progress. Moore's job as a road manager would involve ensuring the construction crew had all necessary supplies and that they worked correctly. Seeing the vast, empty forest stirred something in him. Perhaps the traditional way of life was indeed ending. The villagers needed to change their mindset to enjoy the benefits the road could bring. Back at Dalton Bridge, Joey's team cut a log and used 2 planks as rails for the crucial moment when Joey had to drive the pickup onto the raft. Taking a deep breath to calm his nerves, he slowly advanced under his cousin's guidance and successfully got the pickup onto the raft. Their effort paid off as the raft proved it could bear the weight. But this was only the first step of their challenge. The next morning, they would embark on a 20-hour journey, unsure if the raft would hold up. It was the raft's moment to shine, carrying an expensive pickup on the Yukon River, a bold risk taken by the 3 young men. Meanwhile, Charlie rose early as a village elder had passed away. According to their tradition, moose meat was needed for the funeral feast. As the village leader, Charlie had the responsibility to hunt a moose, with less than 24 hours to do so. He enlisted James to join him for a hunt 15 miles upstream on the Tanana River, a place where their ancestors had hunted moose for centuries. On the other side of town, Moore was feeding his dogs, relieved not to sell them due to his new job, though it was controversial. Today, an unexpected visitor, his nephew Jordan, whom he hadn't seen for 12 years, arrived. Born in the village but having left at 18 to live in Fairbanks, Jordan was looking for work. Moore offered him the dog care job without pay, to which his nephew surprisingly agreed, making Moore wonder about his motives. Regardless, Moore immediately set him to work feeding the dogs. 10 miles downstream, Stan was out alone looking for wood to use for smoking meat, an ancient preservation technique. He had been searching for driftwood for hours without luck and decided to look further. His persistence paid off when he found a high-quality poplar log on the shore, good enough for a week's worth of smoking. Carrying the log back was challenging as the soaked poplar weighed 1,000 pounds, and rowing upstream consumed more power, draining his boat's fuel faster than expected. Given the high cost of gasoline, which they usually use sparingly, Stan had overlooked this issue today. Now he is anchored in the middle of the river, and the force of the water, combined with the weight of the poplar, caused the boat to drift backward. Although he quickly released the wood, the inertia made the boat bounce on the rocky riverbed, nearly leading to a disastrous outcome. Fortunately, he escaped unharmed, but the crisis wasn't over as he still had no gasoline, leaving the boat to drift with the current. Stan had to find a way to save himself. In spring, as the ice melts, villagers traditionally hunt geese using snowmobiles, leaving many abandoned machines on the riverbed. If Stan could find one of these snowmobiles, he might be rescued. 60 miles northeast, Joey's team had been navigating the Yukon River for 9 hours. So far, everything had been smooth, but Kate noticed that the raft had sunk a bit, likely due to the wood being waterlogged. This could be disastrous, as they still had 11 hours to go. The only solution seemed to be speeding up, but this increased the risk of damaging the boat. However, they couldn't just watch the pickup sink. 15 miles from the village, Charlie and James had entered the moose's territory. Both were experienced hunters, and at this time of year, moose are busy growing their antlers and come to the lake to feed. Moose have sharp hearing and smell, which they use to avoid danger. After searching for a while, Charlie spotted fresh moose tracks and they followed them. They soon reached a beautiful lake where the moose was likely hiding in the nearby bushes. Using binoculars, James spotted the target across the lake, so they decided to move closer. In Tanana, Moore used the summer to train his sled dogs with a water treadmill, which keeps them cool while exercising. His nephew Jordan, who had been away from this lifestyle for 12 years, was put to the test to see if he could handle the job. Moore watched as Jordan expertly operated the equipment, much to his satisfaction, and he couldn't help but laugh heartily. With his nephew's help, the year should be easier. Seeing Moore pleased, Jordan seized the opportunity to ask to work through the winter and help with the sled dog races, hoping for a commission by year's end. This was reasonable, but Moore said he needed to discuss it with Courtney and would give him an answer later. The 2 hunters, in the wilderness hunting moose, had been searching for 13 hours without success. They could not return empty-handed, and their situation was becoming desperate. If they couldn't find a moose by the next day, they would be out of options. Unfortunately, the skies began to thunder and rain, severely affecting visibility and making them uncomfortable in their wet clothes. However, the noise of the rain and thunder could help mask their movements, beneficial for approaching the moose. At a bend, Charlie suddenly saw a bull moose, and they quickly pursued it with their guns. As the moose tried to escape, Charlie's rifle jammed, but he managed to fire just in time. Since the shot wasn't fatal, they closed in and shot again. The moose fell, and the hunters embraced, their persistence rewarded. But their work wasn't done. They needed to quickly butcher the moose and bring the meat back to the village safely. Rain-soaked meat can spoil the taste and cause it to sour, so they carefully skinned the moose, planning to finish the job in the smokehouse. After a busy session, they loaded their bounty and started the journey back. 40 miles northeast, Joey's team had been navigating the river for 11 hours. The weight of the pickup was causing the raft to sink slowly. To reach the village on time, Joey had to speed up, subjecting the raft to stronger impacts and risking disintegration. They used a 50-foot iron chain to secure the pickup to the raft, hoping it would help. Unfortunately, creaking noises suggested the raft might collapse any second. They were at the mercy of fate when the rope tying the boat suddenly snapped, leaving them unable to control the raft. The two men scrambled to fix it quickly, reconnecting the line and averting immediate danger. However, with over 30 miles still to go to their destination, their safety was uncertain. In Tanana, Moore and Courtney were evaluating their latest investment. During the discussion, Moore brought up his nephew Jordan's situation. He wanted to find a dog training job here. After discussing it, they decided to give him a chance, though Courtney expressed concerns about whether he could commit long-term to such a job. 70 miles west, Stan, after running out of gasoline, was stranded on the Yukon River. He had been floating for 7 hours when he finally found a submerged snowmobile. It was a challenge to extract the 500-pound machine from the mud. Stan cut down a small tree, attached a hook and rope to the front, and used it to gradually pull the machine out of the river. The crucial moment came when he needed to see if there was any gasoline left in the snowmobile. After cleaning the fuel tank opening and removing the mud, he sucked on a tube to see if any liquid came out. Unfortunately, it was just river water. However, Stan didn't give up, knowing that gasoline floats on water. He estimated there was at least a gallon of gasoline on top. After extracting and settling the mixture, he separated the gasoline from the water and added it to his boat's tank. With the motor running again, Stan joyfully set off home, loading the snowmobile onto his boat. 75 miles northeast, Joey's team was still drifting at 10 p.m. They were 2 hours away from Tanana. Although the raft remained intact, they were approaching a rocky area where the river flowed more rapidly, posing a serious risk. Fully focused, they navigated the obstacles and passed through safely, making their way home just a matter of time. Back in the village, the two hunters successfully brought back the moose meat. They transferred the meat to James's smokehouse. Meanwhile, Moore and Jordan were setting fishing nets in his fishery, hoping to catch some fish to improve the sled dog's diet. Moore had decided to hire Jordan to help with the dogs. Despite Jordan being away from the village for 12 years, Moore expressed his concerns about whether time had changed him. Jordan immediately reassured him, promising to commit fully to his responsibilities. At 1 a.m., the Alaskan summer sky was still bright. Joey's team arrived in Tanana, having spent 20 hours on the river. Their hard work paid off as they safely brought the pickup back, marking an unforgettable adventure for Joey. Charlie's successful hunt brought in 1,000 pounds of meat, giving special meaning to this hunt. After the funeral, life returned to normal. Charlie is the manager of the water plant. Half of the village residents rely on this plant for their water supply. To maintain the flow of tap water, Charlie must constantly replenish the wood supply. During this time, Moore, a major dog breeder, came with bad news. Jordan was planning to move back to the village. 12 years ago, his family moved to the city, leaving behind a trap line that Charlie has since managed. Now Jordan wants to take back the management of this trap line from Charlie. The trap line, located between the Yukon and Tanana rivers on fertile land, brings in a significant income from fur each year, which Charlie is reluctant to lose. He decided to discuss this matter personally with Jordan. On the other side of the village, James and his two sons were collecting wood. With the cold months approaching, the demand for wood would soon surge. Michael, the younger son, is 11 years old, and Joseph is just 9. In Alaska, summer is the busiest time, as they try to stock up resources for the harsh winter. Despite their young age, the two boys had to participate in the labor, which also served as a good opportunity to develop their skills. By the time they reached adulthood, they would be fully capable. To test their abilities, James planned to leave them overnight in the wilderness to challenge their survival skills, taking some supplies and an experienced dog. They set out by boat. Meanwhile, Charlie visited a young man's home, known for his hunting skills, Joey. He had a task for Joey to complete. Some of the village elders were running low on food, and since Charlie was too busy, he hoped Joey could step in. Joey happily agreed. Nearby, there was a forest home to delicious grouse, but hunting them with firearms would damage the meat, so a bow and arrow was the best weapon. Although Joey had never hunted with a bow since firearms became common, he had practiced archery as a child, so he was confident about the task. At the same time, 64-year-old Stan arrived alone at a fishing camp, planning to catch some fish to feed his dogs. To capture them, Stan decided to use a fish wheel, which weighs 5 tons and was not easy to move into the river. Fortunately, he had an old electric winch that provided strong power. To supply electricity, he had designed a hydroelectric generator. But since the parts were repurposed, the machine often malfunctioned. After inspecting it, Stan realized that one of the circuits was broken. He used a piece of wire from a fence to connect the circuit, solving the problem and enabling him to start the winch. He used logs as rollers and pulled the fish wheel into the river with a steel cable. Initially, everything went smoothly, but as resistance increased, one of the chains snapped. Fortunately, it missed him. Stan fixed the problem and successfully got the fish wheel into the river. Next, he needed to move it upstream to the fishing area. 20 miles south in the forest, James and his sons arrived for a special coming-of-age ceremony. Carrying supplies and firearms, they entered the forest, where James taught them survival skills, such as how to navigate, find water, and avoid danger. Bears are one of the most dangerous creatures in the wild, so if they saw bear droppings, they needed to be extra cautious. Once the boys were prepared, James planned to start the challenge. He left the dog with them, warning that if the dog growled low, it meant a dangerous animal was nearby. After giving instructions, James left them alone. In Tanana, Charlie prepared to talk to Jordan about the trap line. Deep down, he did not want to return it. Although it once belonged to Jordan's family, they had moved to Fairbanks since Jordan's father passed away 12 years ago. After a brief exchange, Jordan pressed for the trap line. Charlie did not respond directly, but asked if Jordan planned to stay long-term. Hearing a positive response, Charlie remained skeptical and suggested discussing it again in the fall to see if Jordan was still there. Their first negotiation ended on an uneasy note, making Jordan realize he needed to do something significant to get Charlie's attention. In the forest, James did not actually leave but hid nearby, closely watching every move his sons made. They collected some wood, lit a campfire, boiled water, and during this time, they constructed a makeshift shelter by draping sleeping bags over a frame they built. As midnight approached, the boys prepared to sleep, but James remained vigilant. Predators could take advantage of the extra sunlight to extend their hunting time. Fortunately, the feared dangers did not materialize. At dawn, the chattering of squirrels caught James's attention. They are the forest's sentinels, constantly chattering at predators. The sudden urgency in their sounds indicated a potential nearby threat. Just as James picked up his binoculars, the dog also started barking. He couldn't sit idly by anymore, so he grabbed his rifle and began scanning the woods through his scope. He quickly spotted a target and rushed over as the children were still sleeping, unaware of the approaching danger. After closing in, James identified it as a moose. In Alaska, moose are more likely to injure people than any other animal. Fortunately, it was a young moose, not an aggressive bull, which reassured James. He returned to his watchful position to continue guarding the children silently. In Tanana, Joey prepared to hunt grouse with a bow and arrow. But to avoid potential bear encounters, he needed an armed assistant. He called on Bob, who had suffered a serious snowmobile accident 5 months ago and was not fully recovered yet. After checking their weapons, the two entered the forest behind the hills to search for the tasty grouse. Joey drew his bow as he spotted a grouse in a tree, aimed briefly, and released the arrow. But unfortunately, he missed, much to their disappointment. They had been wandering in the forest for 2 hours before they finally found their first grouse, but again Joey missed. The area, Filled with spruce trees, a favorite habitat for grouse, offered more chances. Joey drew and aimed again at a second grouse, but missed once more. Despite repeated failures, he did not lose confidence, though he started to doubt whether it was his archery skills or just bad luck, as he missed 5 consecutive shots. 40 miles away, Stan was pushing the fish wheel upstream to a fishing spot created by a warm current vortex, an excellent place to catch fish. After adjusting the position of the fish wheel on shore, he turned around to find his boat had drifted away with his supplies and rifle aboard. Losing the boat would leave him stranded. He ran along the shore but realized he had to get into the water. With no other choice, he plunged into the icy river and swam towards the boat. However, the harsh reality was that the boat was drifting downstream, and Stan was exhausted. Reluctantly, he swam back to shore, worse off as the cold continually assaulted his nerves. He was too drained to struggle, but after resting for a few minutes, his survival instinct kicked in, and he stood up to pursue the boat again. 15 miles south, at 9 a.m., James's sons finally crawled out of their sleeping bags. Instinctively, they looked for their father, but, realizing no one else was around, they understood they had to rely on themselves. They quickly packed up and, with the dog, started their journey home. They needed to navigate through the dense forest to find the boat they had moored on the shore the previous day. James was following behind, both to observe their performance and to protect them secretly. After walking some distance, the two boys stopped, appearing to have lost their way. The dog looked at them with a meaningful gaze, as if everything was going as it expected. Hidden in the shadows, James did not step forward. He wanted to see how his sons would handle the situation. After waiting for a while and seeing that they had no solution, James approached them. He first affirmed their efforts, then pointed out areas for improvement. For instance, they had slept soundly while the dog barked and a moose had passed by close to them, which is a serious mistake when spending a night in the wild. After the survival lesson, James led his sons to the boat. Overall, the adventure had been very educational.